In the quiet English town of Gloucester, behind the doors of an unassuming home on 25 Cromwell Street, was a secret so horrifying it would paralyze the nation. This isn't just a story about serial killers. This is a story about control, manipulation, torture, and evil that lived right next door. This is the true horror story of Fred and Rose West. Fred West was born in 1941 into a deeply dysfunctional family in rural Herefordshire. From a young age, Fred's home life was warped. His father was violent, his mother overprotective, and according to some accounts, incest and abuse were considered normal. By his teens, Fred was already spiraling, stealing, lying, and exhibiting violent tendencies toward women. But it wasn't until he met Rosemary Letts that the darkness inside him found its perfect partner. Rose was just 15 when they met. Fred was 12 years older, manipulative, controlling, and disturbingly charismatic. But Rose wasn't a victim. She quickly became just as violent, just as cruel, and together they fed off each other's depravity. They married in 1972, and that's when the house on Cromwell Street truly became a house of horrors. Behind those brick walls, they lured women, sometimes strangers, sometimes their own children's friends. They promised safety, a job, a place to stay. What awaited was rape, torture, and death. The basement was soundproofed. The cellar became a graveyard. And their victims, mostly young women, were buried in shallow graves beneath the floorboards and garden. One of them was Fred's own stepdaughter, Charmaine, murdered by Rose while Fred was in prison. Another was their own daughter, Heather, who disappeared in 1987. Fred told people she had gone to live in a youth hostel, but her body was beneath the patio. By 1994, suspicions could no longer be ignored. Social services began investigating allegations of abuse. Police returned to the house and began digging. What they found would shake the UK to its core. Human remains, bones, buried in every corner of the property. One by one, the names of the missing were identified. By the end of the search, at least 12 victims had been uncovered. Fred West was arrested. But before he could face justice, he took his own life in prison on January the 1st, 1995. He hanged himself in his cell with a bedsheet. He never stood trial, never faced his victims' families, never gave a full confession. Rose West, however, did stand trial, and despite her attempts to paint herself as an innocent bystander, the evidence was overwhelming. In November 1995, she was found guilty of 10 counts of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with a rare recommendation that she never be released. To this day, she remains incarcerated, one of the few women in the UK to be given a whole life tariff. The house on 25 Cromwell Street was eventually demolished, the address erased. The property turned into a public walkway, but erasing the building could never erase the memories. The West's crimes were not just a series of murders. They were the exploitation of trust, the destruction of innocence, a terrifying reminder that evil can hide in plain sight. They called it the House of Horrors, and even today, decades later, its shadows still linger. In the aftermath of the trials, the community of Gloucester struggled to grasp the magnitude of the evil that had unfolded in their midst. Neighbors stood in silent disbelief, haunted by the revelation that such atrocities had occurred behind a facade of normalcy. The once quiet streets now whispered tales of fear and sorrow, as families grappled with the unsettling reality that their own sense of safety had been shattered. Residents would often find themselves glancing over their shoulders, reminding each other that trust could indeed be a facade. The legacy of the Wests loomed large, a chilling reminder that darkness can hide behind the most ordinary of doors. As the years passed, the names of Fred and Rose West became synonymous with horror, their story etched into the annals of true crime history. Documentaries explored their heinous acts, books dissected their psychological profiles, and discussions in hushed tones permeated local pubs and living rooms. The pain endured by the families of the victims served as a poignant testament to the lives lost and the innocence stolen. Mental health services saw an influx of individuals seeking help to cope with anxiety and fear, grappling with the realization that safety was an illusion. Remembering the victims became a solemn duty for many, amplified by memorials and tributes honoring lives cut short. The call for stricter protections and better enforcement against domestic violence grew louder, seeking to shed light on the insidious nature of control and coercion. As the years wore on, Gloucester sought to reclaim its identity, striving to heal from the wounds left by the Wests. Community leaders initiated discussions about safety and support, focusing on empowering individuals to report suspicious behavior without fear. Through unity and determination, Gloucester began stitching its fabric back together, determined that the shadows of the past would not dictate the future. Yet no matter how much distance grew between then and the present, the echo of fear remained palpable. Occasionally, a newcomer would ask about 25 Cromwell Street, the site that had become infamous, and conversations would halt, replaced by uneasy glances. Stories of the Wests had morphed into urban legends, fueling cautionary tales shared across generations. One of the West's surviving children, Mae West, later released a memoir, Love as Always, Mum XXX. In it, she details the unbearable horror of growing up in the House of Horrors and the disturbing duality of her mother, Rose. Mae recalled bizarre moments of normalcy, family meals, birthdays, and even boozy Christmas fruitcakes. She wrote, "Christmas Day was the one day we really did feel like any other family, but under that surface was terror." She described Rose as a manipulator who later showed affection only to control her. She signed every letter from prison, "Love as always, Mum," but never once told me she loved me growing up. Mae eventually confronted her mother about the death of her sister, Heather. Rose squirmed and then cut off all contact. Mae said, "She's the only one left who knows the full truth, but she's never told it." Despite everything, Mae has stayed close with her siblings. People think families break apart after this kind of thing, but we're lucky. We've stuck together. This collective healing process not only honored the memory of the victims, but transformed fear into a powerful catalyst for change, ultimately reshaping a community once marked by horror into a beacon of resilience and solidarity. In this newfound atmosphere of solidarity, stories emerged of resilience and strength as community members shared their own experiences with abuse and control. With each shared narrative, the people of Gloucester not only reclaimed their voices, but also embraced a shared mission to ensure that love and solidarity would triumph over fear and hatred. The legacy of the Wests had become a foundation for change, reminding all that unity can heal even the deepest wounds.